Clara Rose. Welcome to this week's episode of The Savvy Author. If you haven't joined us before, welcome. Each week I talk about topics like analyzing your book idea, brainstorm and blueprint for your book idea and content, of course, writing your content, editing or developmental editing of your content, how you can publish your book when it's done, formatting to get it ready for that, and even how to promote your book after it is published. And truthfully, leading up to the publishing of your book, because this is important to get started early. All of the things that you're going to need to be a savvy author. And then, of course, if you have joined us before, welcome back, my friend. This week, we're going to talk about the other half of what we talked about last week. So last week, we talked specifically just about traditional publishing, helping you to better understand the publishing world. If you're brand new to it, it can be really overwhelming, and it can seem like a daunting task to try and even figure out how to get started. So today, we're going to talk about the other types of publishing that are available to you. So what are your publishing options as a new author or returning author? So you have traditional publishing, which of course we talked about last week. There's Vanity publishing, which I briefly touched on, but I'm going to go a little bit more into depth for you today. Hybrid publishing, which you may or may not know what that means, and then self-publishing, which of course everyone has heard of. Indie publishing, which is also known as independent publishing, is just a term that's used to indicate that a traditional publishing house was not used. And of course, there are a lot of other creative fields out there that use the same term, like indie movies, or anybody who's doing something independently of the traditional way things are done are referred to as indie. Over the years, I've heard different people say, oh, I used an indie publisher. That just indicates that it was probably self-published or vanity published. To help you better understand what each of those things mean, I'm going to break them down one at a time for you and give you a little more meat to sink your teeth into on this learning journey. All right, let's start with traditional publishing, even though we talked briefly about it last week, and I encourage you to go back and learn more in that episode. Traditional publishing is just a publishing house that, usually through an agent, not always, there are a few publishing houses that will take you direct as an author, but most of them want you to have a literary agent, and they act as the go-between person. That's the person who negotiates your contract, those kinds of things. And because the publishing houses only usually work directly with them, your first step, if you're going down traditional publishing route, is to find yourself an agent. Now, that's a whole beast in and of itself, and we could talk about that another day. It is not easy, especially in this day and age, to get an agent. So, that said, if you really are set on heading down that particular path, definitely start looking for an agent that's interested in the same kind of information, same topics that you think you're going to write your book about. And then reach out to them. Find out if they're interested in taking on somebody new. Some agents only will take on referrals from other authors. So, there you have that. Not the easiest way to get published, but certainly still an option if that's what you're interested in. Okay, next let's talk about vanity publishing. So vanity publishing is really just saying that we're going to publish anything for you. Vanity is a good word for it. Maybe not a nice sounding word, but it's a good word for it. So vanity publishers charge the author to publish their book. They usually don't care about the quality of the content, and if the author is willing to pay them, they will publish the book. So the real downside to vanity publishing is they're usually quite expensive. There isn't anything else that comes with it. There are usually no services that come with it to help make the content better in the book. Usually no editing, formatting, things of that nature. And literally anything that you send them, they're going to publish it. They're going to charge you and they're going to publish it. So the real downside to that is the hit that your reputation as a professional might take based on the quality of the book that gets put out. You really need a professional to help you along the way. If you're going to use vanity publishing, you're going to want somebody else in your corner aside from just the publishing house. All right, let's move on to the next kind. The next is called hybrid publishing. Hybrid publishing is Sometimes a traditional publisher that is selling self-publishing services as an alternative for those books that they have rejected for traditional publishing. If they looked at a book and thought, this one's not going to make any money, they might push those authors toward their own self-publishing services. It could be a small press that pays royalties but doesn't charge the other fees to the author, or it could be a publishing service that charges fees for editing and other services and offers publishing, or a combination of any of these, actually. The term is used freely in the publishing world, so be sure to check out the specifics with the publisher that you decide to use. A good example for you is my company. We're a hybrid publisher, and we charge fees for our services, but we don't take royalties. So it's kind of a combination. We consider ourselves author-centric. So that just means what's good for the author is what our intent is. And royalties for the rest of your life on your book is not in your best interest in our way of thinking. So we've created something different. So we're a hybrid publisher. But just because someone uses the term hybrid publisher or hybrid publishing does not mean that that's what they're talking about. It could be any combination of the things that we just talked about. So make sure that you're comparing apples to apples if you're looking at hybrid publishing. Make sure that what you're getting is really what you want for your book. The more educated you are about the process, the better the decisions you're going to make as you move forward. So, all right, let's move on. Of course, we have self-publishing. Self-publishing is a really popular thing these days. There are dozens of online services that offer some sort of publishing. Anyone can self-publish if they are willing to learn the process. And once again, the content quality doesn't really matter when you're self-publishing because no one's going to tell you no. But this is where the most damaging mistakes are made by authors. So while this is commonly used, if you're considering publishing, self-publishing, I encourage you to not go it alone. Self-publishing, even though it's an easy way to get your content and your message out into the world, self-publishing kind of leaves you to your own devices, if you will. As you start to look at the self-publishing options out there in the world, you're going to see things like, BookBaby, and Amazon has their own. Years ago it was CreateSpace, and now it's KDP. It's just a self-publishing arm. And in truth, many small press, indie publishers, Vanity publishers, and even some hybrid publishers use one of those services in the actual production of the physical book. So while they may offer an imprint, their own press mark, they're not truly the publishing arm of the book, like a KDP, where it's a service. It's an on-demand service. So what that means is you can load a book, like I would load a book under my press mark for an author, and then they would have control over how they sell their book, when they sell their book, where they sell their book to a certain extent. For instance, if you have a physical book and you have it on Amazon, say, they offer a on-demand service that when somebody, so here's my last book. I have a new book coming out, but this is my last book, 8 Ways to Mind Your Own Business, Strategy and Mindset for the New Entrepreneur. You can see that our press mark is on it, the Rosedale press mark. When somebody orders this book on Amazon or at the local bookstore if they find it there, or if they stumble upon a website that's selling it, there's actually a bookstore in California that picked up, this is actually a co-authored book. Debbie, she's in the UK, lovely lady. She and I co-wrote this book together. I do the strategy, she does the mindset. Great for new entrepreneurs. The California bookstore that picked this up, they're charging twice what we sell it for on Amazon. And as crazy as that is, so they're making money off of our book as a distributor. And that's fine. We still make money on this book when that publishing or that bookstore orders it from the on-demand printer. which is KDP. They pay for the printing of it. We get a piece of the pie, and then, of course, they're free to resell it for whatever they'd like to resell it for, and they doubled the price. Apparently, they're selling it, and they're making money off of us. That's just the way that it works. If you buy it on Amazon directly, then there's no end distributor, or any book, there's no end distributor. And they will actually publish that one book, print that one book, one copy, just for you and mail it out to you. That's the world of on-demand publishing that we live in now. And KDP is where I use most, I can't say all, but most of my authors go. There's a few exceptions because they don't have 100% of the capabilities that all authors are asking for, although one of them's coming back. So if you were thinking that you wanted to do spiral bound, it's making a comeback, I'm predicting, because I see some scuttle about it. But anyway, so that's the on-demand publishing world. If you, as a self-publisher, think that's perfect for me, I don't want to have a publisher and traditional publishing often works this way, where you're required to have purchased so many of the books for yourself, and then authors end up with a bunch of books in a box in the garage that they're not doing anything with. So if you're going to sell your own books, then that's not, in addition to the publisher selling them, that's not such a big deal. You still pay for them when you get them, right? Anytime something is physically published, printed, you're going to pay for it. That's the way that works. You will put more money in your own pocket if you sell your own books. So if you become the retailer versus Amazon being the retailer, you make more money. If your book makes it all the way out to the bookstore, which only like 1% of books actually make it to the Barnes & Nobles, the Books A Millions, physically in somebody's bookstore, it's a pretty small percent. If your book makes it to there, guess how many people have had a piece of your pie? Pause for dramatic effect. The people who printed the book, they get a piece of the pie. The people who sold the book to the distributor, they get a piece of your pie. The distributor on the end gets a piece of your pie. The retailer that the distributor gets it from gets a piece of your pie. And so if you sold your book that way, your piece of the pie is pretty small. And unless you have a big blockbuster booming success, you're not making much as an author. So there are other ways that you can make more money on your book, and you just need to understand what that looks like. Okay, all of that to say that self-publishing is a great way to get books into the hands of the people that you would like to have them at a low cost, low barrier of entry for you. Now, I highly recommend that if you're going to go down the self-publishing road, that you hire somebody who can help you with that process. Somebody to hold your hand and make sure that you don't make some of the major mistakes, and then somebody to just be sure that the quality of the content that you're putting out is good. Don't just slap it together and think, oh, this is pretty good. You know, my friend read it and said it was great, and put it out into the world. You could later regret that decision as it's under scrutiny. Okay, let's move on. Enough about that. Publishing matters. Publishing matters, publishing matters. Understanding the publishing world and the options that are available to you can really help you avoid costly mistakes and retain ownership and creative control over your published works. How you publish really does matter. Now, of the types of publishing that we've talked about so far today, traditional publishing really gives you the least amount of control. Now, the flip side of that is it comes with a lot of things that you don't have to pay for as an author. If you can get an agent to pick you up, believe in your project and pick you up, and then they get a contract for you with a publishing house, that's wonderful. They're going to do some promoting, although not a lot of promoting these days. Your book is going to come out into the world, and you will make royalties on it. Just a little piece of the pie at the end, and that's completely fine, but that's where you make the least amount of money as an author. It's also where you give up a considerable amount of your control. When you publish with a traditional publishing house, you no longer own the rights to publish that book anywhere else ever again, unless it's written into your contract that at some point down the road, they're going to release those to you. If they're making big money, they don't want to release that to you, obviously, right? I have seen some publishers that, at the 10-year mark in the contract, it says all rights revert to the author, and they no longer get royalties off of you. The big publishing houses, I haven't seen that, but some of the smaller traditional publishing houses, I've seen that happen. But during the creation process, you have very little control. Once you submit your work to the traditional publisher, they have their own editors, their own formatters, they have their creative people in-house that are going to take care of making the book the way they would like it to be presented to the world. That could be that they slash some of your content. They could edit out stuff that matters to you, but they think is irrelevant or not well said. So there's a lot of that kind of thing that can happen. You don't have a whole lot of say over your cover. You can have some input, but ultimately the decision for all of those creative pieces is theirs. You have signed away the right to make those decisions. Now, hopefully they're going to let you be involved at least a little bit, because after all, you're the author, right? This is your creative work. Your name is going to be on it forever. And once physical books happen and they're out into the world, they live on forever. Or that's at least the way that we like to think about it happening. Someday they may go out of print and they're hard to find and they become rare, but once you have it out there in the world, it's a forever kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you I can't even speak today, that you can retain as much creative control as possible over your work. A good agent will make a difference, of course, and if your heart is set on traditional publishing, best of luck to you. I hope that it's an amazing success. Now, of course, if you're going with a vanity publisher, we already talked about, they're just going to take whatever you give them, put it out into the world. You're going to pay them for the privilege of letting them publish your book. Now, I've seen some vanity publishers who will give you creative control over what your cover looks like, and some have a little bit of say, but for the most part, because they're a vanity publisher, whatever you want, even if it's bad, even if it's wrong, it doesn't matter. They're going to publish it for you. Self-publishing, you don't have someone saying, yeah, just give us your money, we'll go ahead and publish that for you, but you are 100% responsible for making good choices around your book. They're going to offer you some things like a free ISBN, but that comes with consequences. So make sure that you study and read, or be here at the show every week so you can learn about how to avoid some of those mistakes. Or, of course, you can hire someone to help you through that process as well. And, of course, everything matters when you're putting together a book. Everything matters. Education matters. The more you understand about writing and publishing, the process, the better. Your strategy matters. Planning to write the book that will become the tool that you need it to be. Formatting matters. A well-formatted book is going to sell better. You need a professional for this. Don't try to do this piece alone. And then absolutely everything matters. Hire a professional or an agency to help you manage all the moving parts. Until you jump into a book project the first time, you have no idea how many moving pieces and parts there are. And in part, that's why this show exists. That's why I started this, was so that I could help educate potential authors on all of the moving pieces, the importance of analyzing the project before you start it, the importance of the brainstorm and blueprint part of, or book build part of, getting your book ready to write. The writing, the editing, or the developmental editing that some people just need for their content. Understanding publishing, all those pieces, all those moving parts. Should I do this? Should I do that? What size should my book be? Does that even matter? Well, here's a little tip I'm just going to sneak in here. The size of your book does matter, because even though you might say, ooh, Clara, I'm going to have a really cool square book that has these dimensions, or I want something really unique. And so instead of the book being this way, I want it to be, my dimensions to be this way. It's going to stand out. All of those things have ramifications. And one of them is this. If your book does not fall within a specific standard, distributors are not going to pick up your book. It's not available for on-demand printing for distributors. Why do we care about that? Well, a distributor is how Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, those physical locations, that's where they buy books. And if your book isn't eligible to be on their list for buying, it can't be there, right? So the 1% chance you had of making it to those bookshelves is gone, because it's not even eligible to be on the distribution list, period. It's on the distribution list. They can't buy it because that's where they buy from, is the distribution list. So really important to pay attention to what is eligible to go from just on-demand printing over to the distribution list. So there's just a little tidbit for you that some places probably aren't going to tell you. And if you haven't been told that, it's not actually obvious to you. And you could end up publishing a book and say, oh, gosh, maybe I should have listened to Clara. I don't own my own rights, or I'm not available, in the bookstores, whatever it is. So I'm just here to tell you, it really does matter, my friend. Okay. You may or may not know this about me, but I am a literary consultant. What does a literary consultant do? A literary consultant is somebody who helps you through the process from start to finish of creating a book. So what does that mean? That means that you have someone to hold your hand through the process of analyzing your potential content, or analyzing your idea and the research that goes into that. Brainstorming and blueprinting, which is the book industry's book build. They call it a book build. I call it brainstorm and blueprint. We brainstorm your content. We blueprint your outline. Makes more sense to me. The writing of your content, the editing, developmental editing, formatting, publishing, promoting, all of those things. That's what a literary consultant does. Now, not every literary consultant helps you with publishing. They're not all of them are a hybrid publishing company. Some are just firms with literary consultants, and then they help you find an agent, or they help you self-publish. They're still kind of holding your hand through the whole process, and that's where the value is. That's something that I do. That's something that I love to do. Okay. We're almost wrapping up here, but I have just a couple more things to say to you. Happy publishing, my friend. Writing a book is still the best way to establish yourself as an expert in your field, and the fastest way that you can create influence for yourself. Hiring a professional literary consultant to help you navigate the process is just going to offer you the greatest chance of publishing success. So happy publishing. And then, of course, before we go, I want to tell you about the next Brainstorm and Blueprint. I've mentioned it a couple of times. The next masterclass that we have coming up, that if you're ready to write your book, it might be time to jump into the next cohort that starts soon. This is really all about capturing all of those book ideas that are floating around in your head. And then, of course, organizing, that's the brainstorming part, and then organizing those ideas into topics that are going to make sense to your potential reader. Of course, along the way, we'll talk about who your potential reader might be so we can make a good choice for them. And then creating an outline for your book, and the industry, of course, calls it a book build, and I use the term blueprint. This is actually the blueprint that you're going to follow as you write your book. As you actually create the content, keeps you on point and on track for your content. No more meandering around, no more writer's block. And then, of course, we end with creating a strategy for the successful creation and publishing of your completed manuscript. And then we plug you into the accountability group to get the writing done. There's no need to do this alone. There are other people who are in the same process that you are, trying to get that book out of their head and get it printed, get it published, and out to the world. We all have a message, and we all have something to say. And this Brainstorm and Blueprint class is going to help you take that first step. Now, I have people say this to me all the time. So, Clara, I already have a half-completed manuscript. This is still a great process for you because you likely did not do a good analysis before you started. You likely didn't do a brainstorm and blueprint, so your content may be a little bit all over the place, and you definitely want help with your formatting, editing, and all that publishing advice that you can get from being a part of our masterclass, and we would love to have you. So join me here each week as I'm talking about all of these things that you're going to need to know to be a savvy author, and I will let you know when you can actually sign up. It's actually closed right now, but when the gates open, I only take 20 people at a time, so you want to be one of those first people to hop on board. If you would like to have early notification, you can send me an email to hello@clararose.com and say, Clara, save me a spot in the next masterclass, and I would be happy to give you advance notice and say, hey, gates are about to open, registration is about to open, and give you an opportunity to jump on fast. Okay, I'm just about out of time, but I have to end each day by saying thank you to Tampa Bay Multimedia and WeBeam TV. That is where we are today, and they truly make this show possible. If you haven't heard of them before, I encourage you to check them out. If you're watching this on WeBeam TV, you know about them. If you are a small business owner or a professional and you are looking for a way to capture more attention and get a bigger audience, I encourage you to reach out to them. They can help you start your own show if you're interested. And then, of course, if that's not your bag, of course, having a book is the number one way that you're going to build influence and create a following. And what does that do for us? That generates leads organically for our business, ministry, cause, or brand. Thank you for joining me once again. I will see you back here next week, same time, same place, for more tips on how to be a savvy author. See you next week.